like the guy who runs Iowa.net runs Windows on Mac.
Yeah. Okay. There's a whole crew of characters in my office space that run Windows and VM on Mac and love it.
He doesn't even run it's a dual boot.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what these guys are doing too. But there's always that one piece of software you have that is supposed to run.
Yes.
Well, it's next place. You guys usually have your meetings. This place new?
I don't know. It's probably 4 or 5 years old.
But I am a recruiter as well. I'm a college recruiter. But I haven't been. Yeah, that's what they're looking for mostly. It's not us, it's HR that says these things out. Trust me. It's all HR related. Yeah, it's up to us. If you have the experience, and you've gone through reputable, training course, whatever. It's okay. HR, there's outlet, having a degree. Yeah. Define on the side.
Never work, only outside.
All right. Do anything like monitoring is not using work equipment. Never part of the meeting. Yeah, as long as you're not using it. Work equipment. It is there. Pretty much each other. It's a little bit tough. But I'm like, part-time reserve for like still going to school. Yeah, so I
honestly expect them to show up and
so internship you could do part-time. But obviously you're not yeah.
But then again, it's been most of the campus stuff.
Yeah, she will call you. She will call you. As long as she does Monday to Friday full time. It depends on what she's doing. That's what I got. Always on projects. Always on calls. Side business. And I get contracted seriously. So from that, here, I get any side about
There is a student organization. I think there is a process for coordinating corporate
the way it works is you have a couple of Jack is probably called maybe 2 or 3 people. Then they go to the manager. Start getting
I assumed it was going to be all done.
The reason I asked was, it's probably most of the time they did do a talk at the last one.
I would keep it to 10.
It's kind of small. It started at 8, we kind of switched to some other things, and they came back and otherwise, the crowd was just there. But it was good. It was good in the sense that I was kind of hoping that everything I bitched about, so I give the crowd would be like, oh, why didn't you just do it like this? So I got a lot of confirmation.
That's I started doing a bunch of C++
Is it better than doing it in a you guys working? It's like you're looking at your fish right now. Actually, you guys are both. No problem. Sometimes you think about life. I was like, about life. There's a lot to think about. Nice 2 hours. It's just a couple windows. The weather's nice. Worse. Hope it's not selling in 2 weeks. Not yet. I think after you, if we can make it through Saturday, we need to get some facts. Yeah, I mean, 45 then. I don't remember it feeling like January. It makes me less. Yeah, Project Partners. Yeah. I keep telling them it's like you guys like a confederacy? A bunch of independent contractors got together and really, so it's a consulting company, but we're not independent. We have all this. Take us It's nice. The company cabinet was there's some really nice stuff. Yeah, I've been really for 3 years. But no, for the most part, we're working clients, right? Minneapolis. Like anywhere else.
sometimes you're working on in-house or in-house client side. Like, get each one very similar to Wells Fargo.
We probably get guys a few calls from
That's funny because we got like 20 people with object partners ish, somewhere in there. Like 14 of them also because we had such good talent.
Apparently they didn't have any. They can't find the people, and so it's a
That was fun.
Defense industry we'll bring in contractors.
Most of it we're going to
Yeah, there's some that project we covered.
You still need somebody in-house to know.
As a taxpayer, I always felt weird. We're working on this project for years and years and years, and then they just decide, nope, we don't want you working anymore. We'll give it to the board. So it tells all the experienced developers.
But there's a level of care when you actually work for the company that
As a taxpayer, that's just like
even stuff on that.
don't open that door.
Start over every time.
It's always not as negative argument when they get the code base. Oh, this sucks. First couple sprints are always sort of factoring hard. Listen to now. There's one guy who been for 15 years. What about six? Yeah, just kept going. Down to 7 hits. You get no exposure to the outside field. I can see how that is. Maybe there's something to it. Yeah.
So what you're over now, and you work for a consulting company too?
I work for a small company called Bird Dog HR. Applicant tracking. We got some funding earlier this year, so now we're kind of I was doing that consulting thing previously. Pretty sure it was February. Oh, that was a few years. And it was tough. I've never made more money in my life. But it was less. Is 72nd Street
Yeah,
years, we've come down here quite a bit. We're down here next week. If I had more time, I'd go. My cousin, that's like the ubiquitous cousin. They just have cousins. Kind of like that, but we can't say it's not going to be. And it's funny too, because I'm CEO, and the commutes. Every time I'm sorry, things I do to me for the graduates. That's pretty funny. They moved there.
They moved there when I was in college. I grew up in Tampa. Yeah, my brother and sister moved. That's how I stayed.
They split on you? Quick, while he's in school.
Me and my dad's like split. He can't excited.
What's like a Des Moines job or something?
At the time he was with Georgia Pacific, was now the longer to
Where do they live at?
West by Valley High School. Not too far from where the
You wouldn't think to investigate it?
at that location every time. I just looked at see
We've been there since probably the beginning of the year, maybe. I think. It's not bad. It's not downtown. I like downtown a lot better. It's pretty convenient.
we were downtown. We were here.
By you guys, I mean Omaha. You guys do a lot.
Sounds like a lot more than you guys do at the moment. Minneapolis and Omaha. I don't want to say there's a few lines in town. Minneapolis is yeah, it is.
Look at all the deer stuff. The reason I ask is, like Matt Payne, when he came up last year, it just kind of felt like Groovy was much more established. And then, I don't know, I watched a video on YouTube about the music guys talking about how they're successfully can't really argue with it.
To me, it feels like Java plus plus.
I was into it a few years ago.
I'm curious how it's going to play out with Java 8. Java 8 is sort I like your everything just kind of works. Especially variables.
We used to live in Jacksonville, and we used to cut the line. Yeah. pretty much everywhere. College, after college, moved to Virginia and was there for years. Back when I really came back is because my wife got sent to law school.
Every highway in the state.
There's a lot.
So,
We used to go to
in this entire country has been in my at least.
I think all the methods mentioned there.
Wait for the Mexican stick back. Yeah, it was good. There's so much time that I get really good.
Don't jump off it. The mud at the bottom if you do, untie your shoes first.
I had a similar experience where boating up in my in-laws and someone was just boating, he put his started running into the shore, so the lake we go to is pretty shallow. This guy didn't really hopped off the front of the boat. He was going to push it back, it wasn't very shallow, and I was straight to him at it. And then it was that momentary pause, and you hear the stories about people who jump off and they just never come back because their nose is down to fortunately, they get off. My sandals didn't make it off the job. Kind of scary.
When it was all done, you didn't like the sandals anyway. Screw you, sandals.
So did you make it back to Malacca for Christmas then?
We're going to try to go back this year. I haven't been back in 4 or 5 years. I still got parents and a brother.
Shut down the contract.
We're going to go to Florida with she's from the So the first time she came down to visit and meet my parents and whatnot, she had expressed interest in seeing me while we were there. I'm sure thinking that it would be so after a night of drinking, we went across the street and fished on a convention put it in bed with her, and then, I don't know, he was no more than self, but he was jaws open, he was listening to her, and she said, back up, and she goes, stop!
Yeah, I don't know how to exactly set up.
And we want to get back to Florida. Not sure why.
We used to go all the way to
So I hate to break up your conversations and things. Slowly, grab some pizza, some soda, water. Maybe go in here and there or so.
You make it to the game tomorrow or Saturday?
So yeah, before we get started, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. This is a great crowd. Lots of new faces. Glad to see everybody supporting Ojug here. And thanks to our sponsors, of course, always. Blue Cross Blue Shield. Marcus, thanks for hosting us here in this beautiful space. Tech Systems, thanks for the pizza, guys, and the soda back there as always. We'll do the IntelliJ raffle at the end too. They're always sponsoring. And then today we also have Aureus Group, who's kindly sponsoring a happy hour afterwards. And we'll give them a chance to say a few words about Aureus if you have anything you'd like to say.
I'm Andy. I'm a account manager with Aureus. And we're an IT recruiting firm here in Omaha. We're based in Omaha. We've actually got quite a few of the team here. So just quick introductions. We've got Julie on the end, Josh, and Justin. We've got Jackie here, and Amanda, and Emily somewhere. So we're really be here. Thanks for having us. We have several Java positions coming up available. Some of you may have heard, and some companies here in Omaha that we are specifically working with. So definitely, if you're at a point where you're wanting to make a change, or you're just coming into your career and you want to hear about these things, we'd love to talk with you guys about it. So just any of us, we're happy to help. So thanks for having us.
Cool, thanks, Amy. And as always, thanks for DJ's Dugout afterwards. I hear there's a hockey party there, so we might have to slide in. We'll see how that goes. And then, so today we got Nate Mawalda and Dan Mullins. They drove in from Iowa, from not just Council Bluffs or anything, Des Moines. So a nice little drive for them today. So appreciate them coming out. And we'll hear all about C# versus Java. So.
Is this going to be a contentious?
Hopefully,
if you want to argue or fight with me, I'm all up for it.
Am I going to get up and leave? I mean, I can't see that.
I promise I'm not trolling anybody.
Oh, okay, all right.
Promise.
But that's what I do. So.
keep all insults at a joke level.
All right. Just before we get started, to kind of get a feel of the room, how many people here are Java developers? Okay. How many people here have done any C# or .NET, VB? Okay. Cool. Awesome. Okay. So, getting started in .NET, particularly if you're a Java developer. So my name's Nate Mawalda. My current title is Software Development Engineer and Test at John Deere ISG in Urbandale, Iowa, just outside of Des Moines. What I would like to talk about today is if you are a Java developer and your manager walks up to you and says, hey, we've got this, we've bought this company, and they have this awesome C# application, we need you to maintain it now. What your cost of entry is going to be. We'll talk a little bit about Visual Studio, get into some C# basic syntax, talk about some web frameworks, test frameworks, and what kind of build tools and dependency management you can find if you're going to be doing a .NET project. Before I get too far into this, I'll kind of give a little bit of my background to kind of ease us into this talk. So I've been doing software development for 11, 12 years now, and a majority of that career has been in Java. I've done everything from servlets to Spring MVC4 style web projects for small, large companies. Done Groovy, done Scala, Maven, Ant, Gradle, you name it. So my career has been on the JVM. And a couple of years back, I got a consulting gig at Deere. And the original plan of the consulting gig was to train up a team of C++ and C# developers to code in Java for the brand spanking new website that we were trying to put together for John Deere. And so we started up that contract, and as things go with contracts, stuff evolves, and suddenly we find out that a major component that we need to make the website run is written in C#. And there's no way to make it work with Java. So we have to do a lot of enhancements and grow around that, so we could have either written it from scratch, which would have added several years to the project and high cost, or we just knuckle down and we learn C# and start becoming .NET developers. I'd done a little bit of C# and .NET through the XNA framework and playing around with games for Xbox, and thought, you know, hey, this stuff can't be that bad, right? Well, I'm still doing it. It made me some money, so so these are the things that, as a Java developer, I've noticed that we've run into as we started doing our .NET projects. So the first thing that you usually run into when you're doing a .NET project is thinking about the cost of entry. And there was some news this week that completely deflates this set of slides. But we're still going to go through them and we'll talk about it at the end. So, as of a month ago, that is how much Visual Studio Ultimate 2013 with an MSDN license would cost you. One seat. One seat. So what could that much money buy you? That. There was a 2009 Toyota Corolla on Craigslist for that much. The one at the time I put this slide together.
Probably get a Dodge Dart, too.
You could probably get a pretty nice new car too.
Yeah.
For that much. You could go on vacation to Atlantis, Bahamas. Have a really great weekend in Vegas. So that's a lot of money, and that's really scary, right? So you get your manager comes up to you and says, "I want to do C#," and you come up to him and you go, "Yeah, that's gonna be $14,000." Then the whole project just dies. Not really. So the reason why you're going to want Visual Studio Ultimate with MSDN is if you want to be the cutting edge .NET Windows Microsoft developer. So you want to have early access to the next version of Windows so you can have your application ready on launch day of Windows 10. Or you know you're going to be using Azure a lot. So you want a lot of Azure storage. You want to have a direct representative at Microsoft that's at your beck and call. That's what $14,000 a seat buys you. If you just really wanted to do C# development professionally, you could get away with Visual Studio Professional for $500. That's the same price of it as an IntelliJ Ultimate license. And Visual Studio Professional behaves just about the same way as IntelliJ Ultimate. Same plugin style architecture, same, especially if you're using something called ReSharper, which we'll talk about in a second. Same kind of refactoring tools, same kind of language support. Your experience would be very much the same in this guy. That's still monies though. How about free? What if I wanted free? Well, as of a month ago, the way to do that was to go through this Microsoft BizSpark program. So if you were wanting to start up a company and for whatever reason you wanted to use a .NET stack, Microsoft would give you that for 3 years for free, that entire MSDN Ultimate license. Or until you start making money. And then once you start making money, then you have to pay them. Another way was there were 90-day trial licenses. So you could go out to visualstudio.com, download anything. As long as you signed up for a developer license, you would get 90 days for free. That's usually long enough to decide whether or not you like or hate a language. And then if you still really wanted the free stuff, you could go for the Express stuff. No reason to do that anymore. Earlier this week, Microsoft decided to go ahead and open source all of the .NET Core libraries, all of the ASP.NET libraries, and there is now a free, fully functional version of Visual Studio as a community edition that you can use if you just want to check out the language. The community license for that is very much similar to the community license for IntelliJ. So if you have a team of 5 and you don't make a lot of money, you can even use it for your commercial application. It's when you're going to start getting into actually making stuff that you're going to make money on that Microsoft is now changing their tune to, well, if you make money, we want to cut. If you're not making money and you just want to feel this out, here, have this for free. Kind of the whole drug addict pushing thing.
Question.
Yeah.
Hey, so I can go home and download this tonight?
Yes.
It's like open source right now?
Yes.
Wow.
So the full, the community edition is based on Visual Studio 2013. And if you really want to, and you want to start, can't really see that, that kind of got blurred out. Oh, that sucks.
What? It won't run on a Mac?
I know, will it?
It's not Mac compatible.
Yeah.
If you have Windows on a Mac.
It's a roller coaster.
There is a preview of Visual Studio 2015, and the big thing about that is that it's rumored that you'll be able to do at least Android development completely inside of Visual Studio, which means Java development. And if you look really close, you can't really see it. We've got Android SDK and Java SE Development Kit 7, and here's this node crap. So if you do JavaScript.
What server is it on?
And so that's a good question. If you're doing your Java development, I'm assuming you could deploy it to Tomcat, Jetty, anything like that. If you want to do Microsoft web development, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the presentation. You don't need to run on IIS anymore, but there are options for if you need to for some reason. So, but this is just a rumor. I haven't actually seen this. If someone finds that and it's not there, sorry, I lied.
Well, that's Microsoft rumors.
Yeah. So someone found this. This is not from Microsoft. Okay, so that's the cost of entry. So if you want to go home tonight and start learning C#, it is now free. The compiler is becoming open source too, so you should be able to compile not only on Windows, but you should be able to compile natively on Mac and Linux as well. Okay, so Visual Studio. This is the answer to every other single question in this presentation. So how do you want to build your stuff? Visual Studio. How do you want to make a web project? Visual Studio. How do you want to do source control? Visual Studio. Visual Studio is really the center of the universe for a .NET developer. As a Java developer, you're probably pretty used to using Cygwin, Console 2, or some other kind of bash terminal for doing a lot of your command line work. A majority of that stuff is hidden behind wizards inside Visual Studio. There's ways that you can get to it with PowerShell now, but for the most part, as you're starting to learn a .NET project, you will find yourself using a wizard inside Visual Studio. It provides capabilities for architecture, design, source control, building, compiling, deploying, publishing, you name it. Any kind of coding activity you can think of, you can probably do from Visual Studio. So features, this is the start page. Start page provides a quick link to all the relevant information you need. There's a robust extension plugin manager that comes with it, so if you need a JSON parser built in or the new fancy Git plugin, you can just go out, look for that, and install it just like you would in IntelliJ, and it works pretty slick. And there's also now built-in integration with Visual Studio Online and the Microsoft Azure Cloud Services. Yeah?
Are the plugins community-driven, or are they coming from Microsoft?
Both. So the .NET community in general is about, it feels like they're about a decade behind us in terms of tooling on the JVM. But a lot of that was because of the closed source, walled garden style mentality that Microsoft's had for ever. As they started adopting an open source practice and something called NuGet has become available, you've started to see a lot more community projects, a lot more open source projects, a lot more free projects that are supported and run by the community. But up until recently, most people just waited for Microsoft to come out with whatever the next thing was. So the .NET community is really changing right now. It's not stable at all. There's a lot of feeling out. So which direction are we going to go with open source? How far are we going to go with it? But it's all really been in positive directions. So the tooling is going to catch up really fast, and the language is already ahead. So the Java environment is going to need to play catch up really fast. You cannot, in my mind, do Visual Studio C# development without ReSharper. You will go out and get this, especially if you've done any kind of IntelliJ JetBrains usage. It plays pretty much the same way as IntelliJ does, except for C#. All the refactoring tools that you're used to are there. It adds in rich test runners. The built-in ones kind of suck, so the ReSharper ones are better. And it has a lot of stuff built in for formatting, refactoring, guidelines, stuff like that. So that'll kind of add to your cost of entry. It's $300, I believe, for a full license and $200 for an upgrade. But it acts as a plugin, and it's completely worth it. It completely changes how your experience of Visual Studio is, and I can't live without it.
So you're still in Visual Studio, it's just a plug-in to that environment?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, and a lot of, so you'll use Shift-N to look for a source file, or Control-Alt-N for inline, or Control-Alt-L depending on which hotkeys you use. So it behaves, instead, Visual Studio, where its hotkeys likes to use what they call chords. So you would press one combination and then it waits for a second press. ReSharper doesn't do that. ReSharper moves more towards what you're used to in IntelliJ. There's still a few chords, like for running tests, is Control-T, Control-R, but for the most part. Any other questions about Visual Studio? Yeah.
What does ReSharper run?
About $300. All right, syntax basics for C#. If you've done any modern Java, C# will look a little foreign, but not too much. If you've done any Groovy or Scala, C# will look a lot like that. So starting a new application, again, when you do anything with .NET, it's done through Visual Studio. So you'll go through the new project wizard. So application is made up of a solution which contains one or more projects. So you pick, say, console application and create a new solution. There. Hello world. Sorry, I didn't update the namespace. So an executable has to have a class with a static void main in it, just like Java. Namespace is your packages. Usings are your imports. Static works the same way. Console is your sysout. So your basic class syntax and method syntax should feel pretty much the same.
Is there a way to do that outside of Visual Studio? I mean, at all possible, is there a compiler that you can just run?
No.
No. So then
as of right now, no. As of tomorrow, probably.
Okay.
So, like I said, the .NET compiler got open sourced as well. So being able to compile your C# outside of Visual Studio is now likely going to be something that's possible. So if you want to use Notepad or Notepad++ or Sublime Text or something like that, or for some of you people that are VI, Emacs, Guru, Wizard people, soon you'll be able to do that C# in that as well.
Does each language get its own compiler? Because I know that F# didn't require a Studio to run it. You could run it in Notepad and then run it.
F# is more of an, yeah, I think it's different per language.
Okay.
Visual Basic and C# for sure. You had to have Visual Studio to build because they ran off of MS Build.
Okay.
F# is a funny language.
It's cool.
It's a very cool language, and I use it for a lot of stuff. But it's kind of, you know how Scala kind of is treated on the JVM? It's kind of those weird, nerdy people over on the West Coast. That's kind of what F# is like. So, every community has their weirdos, right? Okay. So, here's your basics. Projects have properties and references listed in the solution folder. So if you have like application properties, you put those in the app config. Any kind of library dependencies would be listed in the references, and it's listed per project inside the solution. So you would really think of a solution as being kind of more like a Maven aggregate project. And when you build the solution, you're building the aggregate. Solutions will have the test projects inside of them. So this shows Hello World application and then the test project inside of it. The test projects are kept separate, unlike in Java where you have just simply a different test folder. Why that's done, I'm not entirely sure. It has something to do with how the compiler works in running the tests and keeping the test code out of the production DLLs. And you guys can't see this at all. But notice, this is C# code without lambdas, and then this is C# code, the same C# code with a lambda in it.
Looks like it's
Cheating, your font's smaller.
Yeah.
A little bit. It's line count that I'm looking at here. And just like in Java, you can do the 300 character one-liners now. With Java 8, you can do those now. We've had those in Scala for a while. But C# uses, to do functional style programming in C# you use a library called Link. It was originally written for doing SQL queries natively inside your C# language, and then people repurposed it for a functional program. So that's why you'll see keywords like select instead of map or transform.
Select is used as a transform?
Yes.
That seems wrong.
When you think about it, that's what a select is doing though, in a SQL statement.
It's reading data, not reading data.
But it's also projecting. So, that's what they had to do. What's up?
Find wasn't. Find wasn't.
Find is something different.
Okay.
Find is another keyword.
Search.
You have find, filter, where, first, last, first default, last default. Yeah, stuff like that.
If you like Link, you'll like Ruby.
Yeah. Or if you like Ruby, you'll like Link.
Yeah.
Sold.
Okay, so that's it. So now you are now all C# experts. You can now go home and write your first C# application. For all your recruiters here, these are all now C# developers. You can now start letting them, sending jobs their way. Web frameworks. So all of the .NET web frameworks basically evolve around something called ASP.NET. There's several flavors of ASP.NET. You have a code-heavy approach with scriptlets and stuff inside the pages, kind of similar to your older JSP approaches. You have an MVC style approach, similar to Spring MVC. And then there's also kind of a headless web API style for REST web services. All of those run through something called managed under ASP.NET. And then there's some really cool new interactive frameworks under there like SignalR, which allow you to do push-pull style stuff without necessarily WebSockets or other stuff like that. So go check out ASP.NET. All open source now. Yay. So there's two ways you're going to deploy your web applications. One is through Internet Information Service, IIS. A lot of people don't like IIS. I would compare it to your web spheres. It's very heavy. It's built into Windows, but and if you know all the tricks, it's really quick to deploy to and get set up, but you have to play by its rules. It can manage the complete life cycle of a request and all the routing and everything like that. But as the .NET community is evolving, They saw the fat jar with Jetty or Tomcat in it that you could just execute, and all of a sudden you have your web server in it. So they wanted to go the same direction, and that's where we have the Open Windows Internet something. Katana. OWIN Katana. And what that is it allows you to programmatically define a web server without having to get into IIS. And you can just run that as an executable or a back-end service, and voila, you have a web page. I use OWIN Katana for all my web API web services.
You using that on the enterprise anyway?
So, no. But that's my fault. That's not the enterprise. I choose to avoid the enterprise, and I publish my own OWIN stuff, and they don't know about it yet. So, but this is really cool. This is just like setting up Jetty. If you've done that before. Spring Boot,
Yeah.
very similar. Test frameworks. So I like to do XP practices, TDD, ATDD. There's two big ones inside .NET for unit testing that support test-driven development. NUnit is very similar to JUnit, and then XUnit is a more object-oriented .NET-y way of doing unit tests. There's also MS Test that comes with Visual Studio. I would recommend that you just forget that. Don't look at that. I'm using XUnit right now for a lot of my stuff. The big difference between NUnit and XUnit is XUnit doesn't have setup or teardown methods. It's all done in constructors and destructors.
What's the functional test that you use?
That guy, SpecFlow. SpecFlow is a Cucumber implementation for .NET. If you can write Gherkin, you can then fill in the steps with C#. Backing up a couple slides. Tests generally go into their own project inside the same solution, but not inside the same project. Again, that's to keep the test classes, the test binaries separate from the production binaries. If you like mocks, there's a library called MOQ mock that lets you do mocking with lambdas, which is pretty cool. So I set up my expectation on my mocked object, and you can also do verification, you can do callbacks, answers, throw exceptions, etc. And this is what ReSharpers looks like inside Visual Studio when you've got your test code ready. SpecFlow. Okay. Build tools. How many people here use Maven?
What do you mean by use?
Is that synonymous with hate?
Okay. How many people here use Ant? Okay. How many people still build their Java with makefiles?
Gradle.
You guys don't count. Okay, so most of your building if you are wanting to try to do it external to Visual Studio is done through something called MS Build. And it feels a lot like a half step down from Ant towards Make. A lot of groups that I know don't use MS Build directly anymore. They have moved towards a .NET implementation of Ant called Enant.
They don't even call it Nant?
Yeah, they did. Yep. So just like Java puts a J in front of everything, .NET puts an N. N hibernate, N spring, Ninject.
When is there a name it?
There is. So the reason why I asked about Maven is there are currently no tools like Maven or its children for the .NET environment. There is nothing that will manage your build lifecycle and your dependencies together.
Is there something like Ivy that'll just handle the dependencies?
Yes, and that is called NuGet. So, dependencies are very similar to Ivy using NuGet. You can specify the version. It's, again, done through mostly a wizard, but NuGet was kind of the gateway drug for Microsoft getting into open source. So behind this is a PowerShell script. And so if you are willing to go and learn yourself a little bit of PowerShell, you can script all of your NuGet stuff. And you would never have to use a wizard for it. You can manage that through what's called the package console. It's pretty good at transitives. It doesn't have Maven's dependency tree or reactor, so it doesn't prevent you from getting into what's called DLL hell, where you have multiple versions of the same DLL on the same computer. Oh yeah, which reminds me, there's this really dumb thing in Windows called the GAC, Global Assembly Cache, and every other once in a while, one of your DLLs is going to get into that. And what it does, you can never remove it. It's there forever. And it will cause all your builds to fail. So just so you know, that's still there, and you will have to deal with it someday when you least expect it.
So do you just throw that computer out?
Pretty much.
Wow.
But until that happens, life is grand, and you'll want to use NuGet. My guess is with the Roslyn compiler, the C# compiler, being open source, we will see a Maven-like built around NuGet probably within the next couple of years, if Microsoft doesn't push it that way themselves.
What kind of dependencies might you have outside of .NET? I mean, is there a community stuff to go find? Is there a bunch of stuff out there?
So now all the ASP.NET stuff would get managed this way. For dependency injection, I'm not sure I have a slide for it. For dependency injection, there's the library Ninject, which is it's kind of like Juice. In fact, I think it was a forked implementation of Juice at one point.
And it's not like built into Visual Studio?
No. And so you would use NuGet to go get a version for that and make sure that you have the same version across all your builds. And then you can also create your own NuGet packages. That way, if you have internal dependencies, you can serve those out to other people inside your company. Yeah?
How do you do continuous integration? If you have something that's running like on a headless server, do you use Visual Studio? How do you build?
Ah! I lost the slide. Jenkins. You'll have to buy a professional, Visual Studio Professional, so that you have MS build.
So it's still running on a Windows box?
Yes.
That's Jenkins on it.
Yep, but Jenkins is actually really good for continuous integration for .NET. There's a lot of built-in stuff for it. Microsoft, I kind of heard him mumbling. Microsoft will push you towards something called Team Foundation Server. Run away from that. You don't need that anymore because Microsoft has really started pushing Git, G-I-T, Git, and everything works I use Git for all my source control now. And Git and Jenkins will do all your continuous integration that you need to do. All right, some closing remarks. So, hopefully this is giving you kind of an insight to the dark side, so to speak. It can be really daunting when you inherit a project in a language that you're not familiar with. What I encourage you guys to do is, it doesn't need to be .NET, it could be a Python project or a JavaScript project or a Haskell project. What I would encourage you to not run away from it. you'll find that a lot of the things that you've learned in Java really do apply to most other languages out there. The only thing that's different is a little bit of syntax and a lot of the tooling. So a great way to either bring in a new language or to learn a new language is to start by writing tests. So if you are doing acceptance testing or unit testing for your project, have the production code be in one language and have your unit tests or acceptance tests be in the one that you're trying to learn or introduce to the company. Or have your build process make use of the new language. Find little ways to ease the transition into that language, and then you just have another hammer in your tool belt when it comes to trying to solve a problem. There's my contact information. Any questions? Yeah?
What's the one C# feature, library, whatever you have, that if you went back to Java, you just really wish that you would have?
Before Java 8, it would be Link.
Yeah.
I was a Scala developer before I moved into C#, and I'm really kind of starting to get into functional programming, and you can do a lot of the functional programming stuff with Link. Now that Java 8 is out, it kind of scratches that itch, but not quite. I would still probably, in fact, I'm using Java 8 for part of the current project that I'm on, and I'm okay with it. It's pretty cool. But I would have preferred to have used Groovy or Scala for that.
So Groovy has the ability to, you say, Link has?
I would say it's pretty similar in the lambdas. So the big thing about Groovy is Groovy's dynamically typed. C# is
optionally. You can put it on static.
Right. Most people I know use it as a dynamically typed language, and C# is statically typed, just like Java. Any other questions? If you have any questions about C# or polyglot programming in general, feel free to contact me. And yeah.
So when I Google around, there's some kind of thing, Visual Studio on the cloud?
Yeah, so Visual Studio Online is basically what they did is they took Rally and Jira and GitHub and put it all together and then fronted it with TFS.
So you don't edit, I can't use Visual Studio Online with my Macintosh?
No. You can do some, I think you can do some basic code editing in the source files there, but it wouldn't be any kind of full feature development or building or something.
You're not running parallels on there or anything? Like...
No, it's pure.
You can virtualize it.
You should, with the new, you should be able to compile C# on your Mac natively now.
That's good.
I'm not sure how you would code in it because Visual Studio is still a Windows program.
Okay, this is exciting.
All right, thank you.
I think there's more. That's a good
It took us like 30 days.
You like that?
What would I play? And he's using it. They'll a lot for you. I can color your browser. And he's got a page. You can have up to like 5 in here. This is key. I remember when that. Oh, actually, see, that's the name of the top 10 things.
Well, so
throw you guys a curveball a little bit. Originally, when Nate and I did this back in the Central Iowa Java user group, we had a little more mixed bag. We had about half Java, half .NET. So it was more so like an intro to Java, more like a day in the life of Java, and a day in the life of .NET. It feels like everyone here is pretty well Java-centric with some .NET experience.
Except for there's a guy in the back.
Except for that guy in the back.
I'll leave it.
But maybe he can hang on.
That's okay. He'll be fine.
So, I actually gave this talk a couple weeks back at the Central Iowa .NET user group, and it kind of spoke to my heart since I'm Dave Mullins. I am the organizer of the Central Iowa Java user group, and as of 10 weeks ago, I am a VB/C#.NET developer. And, every day, every month, I still organize and still run. And what prompted part of this was I'm a friend with the organizer .NET user group, and I was bitching and complaining about something, and he was bitching and complaining about something in Java, and I didn't quite know, because I always kind of heard the C# thing is better than Java, and I didn't really realize that might be where it ends until I started doing it. And about 10 weeks ago, I started working for this company. Our company is called Bird Dog HR. We're a small Silicon Prairie-ish company, applicant tracking system, HR stuff. Earlier this year, we got some funding from an Iowa-centric venture capital firm, and we're in rapid growth mode, and they had an opportunity for me to do something different, and not a traditional development role, kind of a mixed. But I'm coming into a company which is pretty much run with 12 people total, one developer. And one developer did it his way for 12 years. And when I came onto the project, there's one website, and that'll come back a little bit later, but there is a difference between a website and a web project in .NET land. Websites are bad, web projects are less bad. They use Git for source control, Git for source control, which I'm a huge fan of, but they did feature branches. So everything from a typo to something as large as a multi-week undertaking would all be in a separate branch. And when you looked at the Git branch history, there would be 75 things, and ne'er a piece of 2 branches meet until T- production deploy 4 minutes before that. There was a mix of some MS tests and some Jasmine tests. Jasmine, just your standard JavaScript test, MS tests, the thing that Nate cautioned you against even looking at. There's no continuous integration, and all deployment was done manually. So for you guys unfamiliar, one thing that a website project offers is think a bunch of static JSPs sitting on disk, and one of the selling features for the website is you can go into your production server a la PHP style, change the code, hit save, things pick up and start running automatically. No deployment, no compiling, no testing needed. So I came in a little bit different development experience. So I came in kind of your more traditional Java tester development, continuous integration, all that stuff. And as you're kind of looking around all the stuff, that at first you're thinking, okay, that's fine. It just happens to be the place I'm working at. They just didn't have a lot of experience in this. I'm sure we can make this happen. We can get this stuff up and running. It's just a matter of, I know what we want to do, just how do you do it in this environment? As of today, we do have continuous integration. We're running on Jenkins. We're not using the professional. We're using just your standard out-of-the-box Jenkins. We do have a command line build. We have some MS. We're able to run our tests. We're able to run the Jasmine test, which was nice because I think when we started running out of the 250 or 260 in there, maybe only 25 were broken. And it's a lot easier to fix 25 than if we let it go much longer. And then once they're half broke, you're not going to touch them again. We converted the website to the web application, and now we have automated deploys. So the reason why I gave you that context isn't really to talk about how great this place is or how far we've come. Mostly is I think that what I'm talking about is moving beyond the C# versus Java discrepancies. And some of the stuff that I run into, you might not run into. If you walk into an established C# project and you're just a cog who's going to start contributing some code, you'll have a much better experience. But if you're starting from scratch and you're trying to put in place continuous integration, testing, automated deploys, I think you run into a lot of the same things that I had. So originally when we had this discussion, the talk became 10 things, I think I pitched it as, well, 10 things that suck about being a Java developer, doing .NET. And as I sat down, I realized that it's actually worse than that.
So I dialed it back a little bit, and then I kind of felt that this quote, for me, sums it up really well. I think they came late to the game, later than Java. They've got much stronger control, so they're able to dictate a lot more terms. And when they make a product, they make it really well. But the problem is this. They can make 1.6 ounce burgers all day long, but the second you throw the 1.7 ounce, things get dicey. And unfortunately, most of the stuff we do fits into the 1.7 and above category. So the talk eventually became 12 things I said about Java developers.net. And I think kind of what I'll do is, granted this is more geared towards the .NET crowd who doesn't have a whole lot of Java experience, so I'll try to keep it relevant and run through it. The first thing I think you need to understand is it only runs on Windows. And I know that things are changing a little bit. As of now, you can only run on Windows. And it's just odd because I see Java supports everything, but it's not just Java that does this. Come to think about it, a lot of us do stuff besides Java. I mean, in my personal development experience, yeah, I do Java primarily as the day job stuff, but at nighttime it's a lot of Ruby, it's a lot of Android, it's a lot of iOS, a lot of JavaScript. And I just couldn't think of anything that restricts you to the operating system that you need to run on. For some of us who run on God's hardware over there, having to go to like some giant piece of pre-manufactured plastic it's not very fun. And why should the language that I develop my web application in be dictate the terms that I have to write the code into? But then the locking doesn't stop with what you develop it in. I mean, it kind of goes all the way up the chain. And I found that this Stack Overflow quote or comment is pretty good. And I think this sums up a lot of the stuff we're into because people will say mono. People say you can run this stuff on mono. You don't have to do it on Windows. But what I think is it falls into that first comment. Yeah, you could use patching mono, but it really seems like a lot of work. Why don't you just use IIS? And I think that's the overarching mentality is you could do it, but you're now firmly moving into the 1 percentile crowd, and you're kind of off. You're off on your own on this one. The second thing that's one kind of server management. That was kind of a tough one that took a while for me to get used to. You need to hop on a production box and take a look at a log file, and you need to look at some configuration. I instinctively open up a terminal, type SSH, and start to go. What you'll find is that SSH isn't natively installed in Windows. To actually install OpenSSH, it's kind of a pain. And then what you end up doing is you start doing remote desktop. And then if you're in a place where you don't really have the most well thought out server management structure, and you only have one login and password for that, if any of your code teammates are working on that box as well, as soon as you log in, you're going to kick them off. Hopefully they didn't have anything they're working on that was great. So it just seems really odd that of all the things in the world today that you can't just SSH onto a box and start poking around. Package management, that's kind of another one too. I mean, if you look at any of the Linuxes, be it Yum or the Fedora group, or be it apt-get for the Debian group, or even on Mac with Homebrew, those things are missing. I mean, it's like you're going to go out and install a package off the internet. Now, granted, there's a new thing out there called Chocolatey, and Chocolatey's not bad. It's not the same as this. I mean, what it's going to do is, what Chocolatey has done is it's pretty much centralized all of the installer.exes.
Is it a wrapper to NuGet?
Yes.
Of course it is.
I know.
Chocolatey nougat.
So all it does is
15 years behind you.
Twitch.install. First I wish I was on Linux. CMD.
Yeah, so it's not as bad as it could be, but it's not as good as what else is out there. This one here became real troublesome too. I said, to piggyback on what Nate said is, I think the world revolves around Visual Studio for .NET. Unfortunately, in your continuous integration environment, Visual Studio, you would prefer not to be there. It will end up being there eventually, but you don't want it to be there. So the first thing that we try to do, and I think you just take it for granted in Java, that you have Maven, or you have Gradle, or even you're still rocking the ant file, you have the ability to be able to run it, and if it works locally, it's probably going to work in some upper environment. There's really not a similar concept, or at least there's not a Gradle or a Maven for .NET. There's an ant, but it just really feels odd in this day and age to fire up an XML file and write an ant. It feels like we should have moved beyond this one. We use Albacore, so I'm experienced with Ruby and Rake. So Albacore is a gem which plugs into your Rake file, which gives you the MS build and MS test and some of the other commands, and that's what we use. It's okay, but once again, it kind of falls into you're not like everyone else, and you're probably in a much smaller market on figuring out and making it work. And of course, there's Maven. One thing that we ran into, which is real kind of a pain in the butt, is I think in Java, you take for granted that the only thing you need to have installed is Java on the machine, and like Maven will take care of installing its plugins, its dependencies, its everything else, and you're good to go. What Microsoft technologies feel like is everything is integrated at the operating system layer. So for us, in order to run MS Test, there's not a standard MS Test installer, at least at the time we were looking, and there's not a jar or a DLL or something else you just copy and put on the path. And I found one example on Stack Overflow of a guy saying how to extract it from Visual Studio by like screenshot 8 and manual step 12. I aborted and thought there's no way this is going to work. So that's what we had to do. We had to install Visual Studio and put it on our continuous integration server just to be able to take advantage of MS Test. And granted, you could say that maybe we should use MS Test and all things that would have been nice to have known 6 months ago. And then another thing that's really weird too is inside our command line build script, we actually have to specify the version of Visual Studio that it's running against. So in our team, we've got a couple guys running 2013, one guy running 2012, and one guy running 2010. And you just hope that the guy running 2010 or 2012 doesn't commit the build script changes, because now continuous integration won't work. And I just can't believe that your continuous integration environment would have any concept or awareness of the IDE used to create it. This is kind of nitpicky, but the NuGet stuff, yeah, it's dependencies, but it's not really baked out that well. What's highlighted there is one thing called enable NuGet package restore. So compare this to Maven. Pull down a clean project, you don't have any jars inside your source control. You run Maven install, and he pulls everything down, or Gradle, and he'll take care of sucking the internet down and putting it on your hard drive. What NuGet does is it doesn't really have that, at least not out of the box. So you don't want a version of the DLL, so you have references to it, and then you pull it into your project, and then you have to enable that guy. Well, that guy then doesn't work in continuous integration mode, so you turn that guy off, and you have to hand edit like 6 different config files in order to truly make it go away. It just seems like in this day and age with such tight IDE integration, if this was a big deal, they would have got it at least smoother integrated. So, like Nate was talking about Visual Studio, I think Nate was too kind to Visual Studio in comparing it to IntelliJ. I think it sucks. It's like and I don't mean that to be critical, but it's like a 6/10 version of IntelliJ in all manners, and that's even with some of the stuff that ReSharper gives you. But it's just not as good of an IDE, and a lot of this stuff, and I think kind of my delimiter of what's a good IDE is how much stuff can I do on the command line versus how much stuff do I have to click to make happen. And it feels like the click ratio in Visual Studio is really high, especially the right click on Visual Studio, because there's a lot of refreshing, a lot of wizards, and a lot of other things that you have to do on your day-to-day development perspective. And then the second one, I don't know, maybe this just comes with more experience, but say you've got a couple, 3 projects, something's broke, and then a dependent project, and then you compile it, and you have 250 compilers. You have to scroll all the way down to like number 249 to find out what's the culprit, fix him, and then the other 248 go away. Seems like that would be better. It's also expensive. I mean, yeah, I know you don't have to buy the 13,000 one, but it's still something to consider that every year you're looking at $800 in IDE costs just to stay relevant. And I personally find the IntelliJ Community Edition, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the JetBrains product, so if I'm working for a company, I would definitely encourage them to pay for it just because I'd like to see that company get the revenue. But if cash was tight, the Community Edition for IntelliJ gets everything you need, at least what I've needed. But the cost doesn't end, just like your hardware, it doesn't end with IntelliJ, I'm sorry, with Visual Studio. We don't use EC2, we actually use another cloud hosting inside one area. Same size, same processing power, but Linux one, 56 cents an hour. Microsoft with the nice SQL Server is $2.56 a compute hour. So that's kind of one of those costs that it just keeps coming. And as your app is more successful, that cost will keep going up with you. And then as you add other environments like your development environment or your staging or your testing environment, that keeps going too. I don't quite know why they do this. They're big on metadata files. So the metadata file is stuff about the project. So in a Maven project or a Java project, just if it's in the source project, it's part of your, if it's in the source folder, it's part of your project. With this stuff, you can have stuff all day long inside that folder, but unless it's actually been added to the project and lives inside this metadata file, it's not real. So if you do anything like copy it into Windows Explorer, it doesn't work unless you add this. And then it goes the other way too. If you delete a file, you have to go through Visual Studio to delete it to update this metadata file. And then if you got a couple, 3 guys cranking out code in similar areas with adding files, removing files, then you can run into some git merge conflicts too, as you're just managing that. This is kind of a nitpick argument, but I think that one downside to C#, I think it's too similar to Java. Like I know why they did it, because I mean it came out in 2000 and they saw all of the cool stuff I guess Java was doing and they just made a duplicate copy of it. But it's got none of the wow factor or cool factor or the other stuff out there that really makes you want to jump ship to go do it. Now the other one they've got, have you guys seen Visual Basic, even VB.net? That's different. You know, give them props for some of the stuff they came up with in that one, but using the single equal sign for both assignment and equality is, it takes a while to get used to. Continuous integration, same deal. Get the command line thing to run, but I think your CI goes a little bit better, but command line is tough, CI is tough. I also feel too that my C# stuff, there's a lot of generated code. I kind of feel like generated code was big on Java like 6 years ago. Well, and I sincerely mean that. Like, it used to be like, you know, back when SOAP was king, and the first thing you did is you took the WSDL and you generated your 6,000 automated classes. And now with the whole JAX-B thing and just annotating your stuff and REST, but it just feels like most stuff here, not most stuff, a lot of stuff starts with the generated code, which then you then have to version, and just seems superfluous. So I'll give you a quick overview. If you guys do start a new .NET project, and you're going into the new project wizard, definitely select C# project and not the website, because what a website is it's literally just static files with some code behinds. So think JSPs with scriptlets. And the biggest downside to that is, like Nate was mentioning, test projects aren't part of the source. They're separate projects. And you can't depend upon a website, so you can't create a test project for a website. So anything that goes in there can never be reused by anything else. And from a functionality perspective, they're almost identical. Oh, you also can't compile a website. You can only do the stuff hot deploys. So just don't even entertain websites. It's not worth the retrofit you have to do. And it's such a common thing that people go from website to web application that they build into Visual Studio a convert to web application project right in there.
Could it be for backwards compatibility? No.
I don't know either. I don't know why somebody would create a new project for backwards compatibility, but
I'll ask the guy in the back.
okay, we'll ask them later.
Yeah.
The test-driven development, I find the test-driven development to be really tricky too. Anybody who's used IntelliJ or the quick test inside Eclipse, you just take for granted the Control-Shift-T or Command-T that lets you jump to your test or create a new one. That doesn't exist inside Visual Studio. The separate testing project, and one thing that's what I find really troublesome with the testing project is when you're doing TDD and you create your test and you create your class which doesn't exist, and you use your IDE to create it for you. It'll start by putting it in the file in the test you're working at, and then you can extract that out, but it still lives inside the test project. And then you have to take it out of the test project and then put it into the actual project you want to put it to. So it feels like even something as simple as creating a new class is 4 steps compared to just the 1 step that you might be used to. So then as I started thinking a little bit more about it, I started doing a little bit more .NET. The title and the presentation shifted a little bit. I started thinking, you know what? There are some things that aren't so bad about this .NET thing. Maybe it's not as bad as I thought and I can get used to it. Some of the things that, what I do like about it compared to Java is, I find Java very verbose, and I think that the ceremony that goes around trying to tell it what you want to do is pretty superfluous. Getters and setters, semicolons, default scope being protected, as opposed to private or public. Just a lot of words compared to some other languages out there to be able to get the same thing across. And when you look at C# or one thing I think is really nice for initializers, and I think anybody who's done Groovy, this probably is second hand or second nature, but to a straight Java developer, it's kind of nice being able to do stuff inline without having to assign variables and then set it or add it to lists. That's not bad. Properties, I think properties are pretty sweet. It's kind of like a public variable, but you can wrap getters and setters around it. Because when you look at any object with a decent number of properties, the amount of syntax which goes just to show getters and setters, that's a lot of code.
Wait, so property is an instance variable?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the link's not bad. Link's not quite, I think, as good as the Groovy stuff. I like it a little bit better than the Java 8 stream stuff just because it's built directly into the collections or anything that's iterable, as opposed to having to do that extra streams thing. I also felt Java, the language itself, was really late to the functional game. I kind of felt that functional stuff really took off in the last couple of years. But then here it is, 2014, and Java just got closures and lambdas and whatnot. However, there's still the delay from the time the language gets it before you can actually start to implement it. And especially if you work for a large insurance company, which Des Moines tends to have a lot of, you're looking at a few years before it's going to be WebSphere certified. The other thing too is I kind of feel that the Java, the language, has hit an innovation plateau. I feel that all the cool kids who really are on board with it a few years ago got tired of waiting for change and they jumped ship to these guys. So I think on the JVM, these are the hot ones. And then if not JVM ones, I think the impending node tidal wave is going to come get us all. And then also, for better or for worse, one thing that Microsoft does is, since they have total control, at least they did until recently, of everything, all facets of your experience, it's a pretty unified and integrated experience. So when they do something, and you can right-click inside your IDE and take it all the way through to production, there's a lot of steps that have to happen, which you don't get in Java since you don't have the vendor lock-in. But you do have some central guidance and some central leadership. Java, we don't really have that. I think, Sun died. Oracle will keep us going until, like all things Oracle, you just gets onerous and you just stop using it. And then now what stepped in is Spring. Spring is our new official stepfather. So I think that every project which starts off, I would have a hard time arguing that it doesn't involve Spring in some manner. But I don't think Spring is necessarily the answer for all of our development needs either. So then I thought a little bit more, and I thought,
Yeah.
that is Java sucks. So let's do Clojure. I'll tell you, I don't have a whole lot of first-hand experience in Clojure.
That's awesome.
I'm really interested in it. I really want to do it. I think it's satisfied. It's a different category. A lot of parentheses, a lot of formal rules, and it runs on the JVM. So
There's not as many as there are brackets in Java.
oh, that's good then.
Yeah.
Joel Spolsky had this one back in 2005 about Java, but I think it also applies to .NET too. But pretty much what he's saying is that the whole reason, so programming languages like Haskell or Clojure or some of the more functional list-based ones were what real programmers use to solve problems, and then this object-oriented crap is what the masses would use in order to keep computer science students in the program and graduating, and therefore larger budgets. And his kind of argument is saying that he thinks he can take any functional programmer and make them a much better object-oriented programmer in much less time than it would take an object-oriented programmer to become a proficient Java one.
It'll scream a lot.
So then, the selfish side too is I think that they're, especially with completion, you ever watched a not very proficient developer code? You know, they type one letter, hit control space, look to see what autocomplete's going to tell them to do next. Hit the next one, control space, and then it's just this for a while. And they can do it. I mean, they can be proficient. The thing is, do you want to be working with those people, or do you even want to be those people? And I think that, you know, Java and .NET are geared towards those people. I think Clojure's not. And you know, from a language perspective, I think a lot of times too, I think it just happened to be the first job that I graduated in was a Java shop. And then the second job I got was a Java shop, and I just kept it rolling after that. And maybe some of the .NET folks, their first job was .NET, and they just kept going with that. And it's easy to get religious about some of this stuff, and it's easy to say that my language is better than your language, or vice versa, because that's all you know. And when all you know is the 3 or 4 tools that your language offers, that becomes the only tools that you have, and you can solve near any problem with those 3 or 4 tools. Just like with relational databases, we can solve any problem with a relational database, mostly just because people have been doing it for so many years and you know how to do it. That's not necessarily saying that we should do all these problems in relational databases. We shouldn't do all these things in these languages. And I think something like Clojure offers new ways of learning, new methodologies that might really open your eyes to how you do stuff in other ways. So this is what I want. Hardware agnostic, no wizards IDE, command line first. It's got to look different, and it has a strong testing framework. And I think if we can get those things, then I think I'll be satisfied. Until then I'm working .NET, I'm working C#. I'm trying to evolve stuff out of VB.
So why? I'm waiting for the end of the book. It sounds like you hate it, and it sounds like you're running the shop there a little bit. I'm trying to figure out what you're doing. Like, I'm glad you were able to bring it up to a not suck level, but it sounds like you hate it. Am I wrong?
Well, I think the thing I might say is the making it suck part. Like, I don't think I made it suck.
No, and not suck.
I think there's 2 things for it. One is that I've worked previously in C# environments. In the C# environment I worked in before, I was the cog, so it was pretty easy to get in and get going. I wasn't the guy who started the stuff from ground zero and got it up and running. The part of the thing about when I took this opportunity is I wanted to see what it was like. And I wanted to see, like, I didn't want to just say it's .NET, so it sucks, therefore I'm not going to touch it. And I think in retrospect that might have been the tone I was giving off. But what it is worst case, there's 50% more contract opportunities if this goes bad in the Des Moines metro area. And it isn't quite as bad as it may sound, but it isn't quite as good as what Java has. And it's not quite as good as I think as what not Java languages do offer. But like what Nate was saying too is, it is like Java from a few years ago. And with some of the stuff with the new CEO and the new directions they're going, it might do one of these things. And with central leadership and central guidance, imagine if you had the enterprise with an innovative leader. Because I guarantee that Closure will never be run by Principal Financial Group, and Closure will never be run by Wells Fargo. But who's to say in 5 years the same conversation will be taking place with why it sucks to be a Java developer when you come from .NET too. So I think the times are changing. As of today, it's tough. So it's not just C# versus Java. It's the ecosystem versus that ecosystem. And I think in that way, it is not nearly as advanced as you'd like. Why would I want no IDE? So in the early days, before I got too far involved into it, it would come down to my language is better than your language because IntelliJ is better than Visual Studio. And I don't think that your IDE should be the defining characteristic on why your language or why your development environment is better than the others. And I did say Vim excluded, but I do think that you can make Vim as robust or powerful as IntelliJ if you wanted to, give it enough plugins and enough time. But I just want to abstract the control space programmers and get away from all of the right-click wizard crap and just make it. I just want to type less and do more.
So would you amend it and say no wizard or ID necessary?
Right. Maybe it's not required to do your build and manage and everything.
There are people out there that do amazing stuff and their hands never leave the keyboard. They're just, everything's command line. They're just, I can't even see their fingers move and they're awesome. There's also a whole lot of people that are real good at wielding the IDEs, and the IDEs are real good and knowing all the refactorings you can do, pulling up, push and rename and all that kind of stuff and extracting stuff that the command line guy would just go, I'll just do a find and replace and I'll fix it all in 3 seconds. He probably will. So I don't think there's a camp that's right on that. I think you just happen to be a command line guy, it sounds like, in an IDE world right now.
And I think when I did this presentation, it was some introspection and soul searching. It was, I was Java, I am now .NET. What do I want to be? So I think at the end, this was more the, I don't want to go back to Java. I don't want to stay doing .NET.
So you're not going to work for Google then?
No.
It sounded,
But what do I want to do, and then where do I want to go with this?
it sounded like all the stuff you liked about .NET though was filled by Groovy, was it not? Almost everything you said about like the
Syntax sugar?
What's that?
The syntax sugar?
Yeah, I mean most of it was language stuff based, and a lot of that was found in Groovy and Scala. Was it not?
That's actually a pretty good observation. Yeah, I think the stuff that I did like is just the syntax sugar.
And you can get back on the JVM. You can SSH to tail your log files and you'll be happy again.
Yeah, or also maybe maybe it's the square peg round hole deal. Maybe it's maybe if you're only used to remote desktop and you don't like SSH, then maybe these are all reasons why you wouldn't like working outside of Microsoft. So maybe I'm just making some assumptions based on if you are Java, then you are these other characteristics, and maybe those aren't valid also. So these are the views and opinions of myself.
I think the remote desktop problem is going to go away pretty soon. Microsoft is aggressively working with Docker to bring containers into Windows. It's going to take a while, but I think you're going to see them adopt more of a Linux style deployment architecture going forward. I don't think they have a choice.
Why's that? As far as not having a choice,
I think too many people like it, right? It's a sign of productivity, right? I'm an old Unix guy. The Windows interface gets in the way for me often. It's just a pain in the butt, especially when I'm pushing out stuff that isn't graphical.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of that. Plus, you can run a lot lighter if you're not running an instance of a Windows server. Now, in Windows, of course, it's built into the kernel, but it's still lighter to not run that with every single instance of the OS.
Yeah. So, That's it. Thanks for hanging along for my journey from Java to .NET to something else.
Hey, I'm gonna go endorse everybody on LinkedIn for .NET now. But no, thanks guys. Really appreciate you guys driving out. Really good stuff. .NET. A lot of things I had never heard before, so really appreciate driving out for that. Also, gonna let Matt Payne give a little chat here really quick about the Omaha Tech holiday party.
So last summer it was at the Black. It was on the top of the roof. A year ago it was downtown at the Upstream Brewery. This year, December 3rd, starts at 5, ends at 8. The annual tech party at Beer Cave near 62nd and Maple. You should come. It's free. There's going to be pizza and maybe beer.
No. And arcade games?
And arcade games. I think the whole place is being procured for those hours. Should be amazingly fun. Leave your laptop at home. Come out and have a really, really good time. Hope to see you there. Invite others. The RSVP is still open right now. Only 75 people have applied. So you should come. December 3rd, 5 p.m. RSVP ahead of time so they get the food count right. Be a really good time. It's free, like all good things. Yes.
Matt, I'm sure Matt was very thinking about this, but didn't say it out loud. I think you need to RSVP through the Eventbrite link,
Yes.
not on Meetup, because that will cause confusion.
It's tricky. The Eventbrite is very, very green. Very December-y.
You see something green and red that almost hurts your eyes.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Well, there's not a design group.
They put the blink tag in there?
Really? It's all tag. No, it's not.
That's HTML1.
Who in the tech world think red on green looked
Search for Eventbrite Omaha holiday party.
Yeah, and it's on the mailing list. If you have trouble finding it, just send a ping out to the mailing list. We'll send it out again.
And then, so a couple more things. So thanks to Rick Canton, he's streaming us today. So we're actually streaming on Ustream, trying out for the first time. So we'll see how the video turns out. Maybe we can keep doing it next year. No meeting next month. So happy holidays and all that. We'll be back in January.
There is a meeting.
We'll do, well, I guess the Omaha Tech Party is the meeting for December. So I don't have a laptop up here, but we'll do the IntelliJ drawing before we go. So we'll go, so what we do, Matt's going to pull up on his trusty laptop over there.
Good old random.org. It's exciting. So there's how many rows? 1, 2,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows.
7 rows. Okay.
So
we should do 8 for the sides.
Oh, okay. We'll do 8 for the sides. There you go.
Sides.
All right. So the row is.
So you're 1 in the front.
4.
No, 1, 2, 4.
Is it 0 base?
The row right behind Matt.
I think it's 1 based. Sorry.
1, okay.
I think the C# is 1 based.
I want an answer on that. Is it actually 1 base? Okay.
No, it's not.
Oh.
I told you the guy in the back knows.
All right. So row 4. We got 5 fabulous candidates. Yes.
Starting from 1 over here.
Yeah.
All right.
So Bob is 1. 5. Congratulations.
We're giving away licenses.
And then while Matt takes care of that, Orius Group has some awesome t-shirts.
We do. We have t-shirts for everybody. So as you're heading out to DJs, come grab a t-shirt. Let us know what size you need. And yeah.
Geeks need love too.
There you go.
And they would love to buy everybody a drink at
We sure
DJs
would.
too.
Free
So
drinks.
we'll see everybody there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So really, did you just bake some That's what you did, man. Like, just admit it. You said, I don't like either.
Yeah, he's done a job.
We're the closest.
I'll be